I thought the worst part of losing him would be the heartbreak. But it wasn't the breakup that changed my life. It was the moment I realized the man I loved was not just a liar, not just a cheater, but someone who genuinely believed I was too weak, too naive, too insignificant to ever fight back. He thought the most I would do was cry, beg, maybe blame myself. He thought I would disappear quietly. He had no idea I was about to unravel his entire world. And all I needed was the truth, a disposable camera, and the arrogance he wore like a second skin. Before I take you through this long road of betrayal, humiliation, and revenge shaped by pure karma, consider supporting the channel. Every like and comment helps stories like this reach the people who need to hear that justice can still find its way. Now let's begin. I remember the first time I met Jake. It was the early 90s. The air smelled like cheap perfume and textbooks, and everything in my life felt bright and wide open. He was 23, tall, charming, and the kind of quietly confident that made you think he understood the world better than most. I was young, working full-time, planning my future one step at a time. We clicked like we had been designed to find each other. Mutual friends introduced us, but it felt like fate placed us in the same room. He was preparing to move across the country for grad school. I already had plans to move 90 minutes from his new city. We joked that the universe shipped us 3,000 miles like a matching pair. He had 2 sisters and a younger brother who welcomed me instantly. They were warm, funny, smart. His family felt like an extension of mine. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to how different he was from them. Jake lived with 2 roommates, both in the same graduate program. Their place was nothing fancy. A sagging couch, old carpet with patterns that looked like coffee stains and regret, a kitchen with mismatched plates. But when you're 20-something, that's enough. We spent our weekends eating tacos, staying up late talking, laughing at sitcom reruns. I loved that simplicity. He studied animal sciences, aiming for a PhD, so the house was full of small animals. Tanks, cages, bins labeled with scientific names I could barely pronounce. To him, it was research. To me, it was fascinating. I adored animals, and spending time there felt like slipping into his world. I even befriended his advisor's wife, Mary, who worked in university administration. She was older, kind, perceptive. She would later become a turning point in everything. For a while, I really thought Jake and I were building something real. I didn't see the cracks forming. One night, about 2 years into the relationship, we were lying in his bed. The lamp cast a soft glow on the wall. We were half-dressed, wrapped in that comfortable silence couples settle into. I was relaxed, secure. And then he said it. He said he was concerned I had gained weight, that it made it harder for him to feel attracted to me. He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I remember sitting up slowly, the chill that crawled up my spine, the disbelief pressing against my chest. I wasn't insecure about my body, but hearing that from someone who claimed to love me, it still stung. Not because I believed him, but because of what it revealed. There was no worry for my health. No worries. No empathy. It was all about what he wanted, what he found appealing, measuring my worth with the same shallow precision he used on his lab animals. I stared at him and said, "Then maybe you should make sure there's better food here than crackers and cheese." Even at 23, I didn't crumble for anyone's ego. He blinked at me, confused I wasn't sobbing or apologizing. I asked him plainly, "So what's your solution?" He had nothing. Just silence. And silence says everything. I got dressed, slept, and drove home the next morning. No fight. No drama. Just a growing awareness that something inside him had soured. 3 months later, he called to break up with me. His excuse? "You don't know enough about science." I actually laughed when he said it. I asked for the real reason. He stuck to the lie. But when he came to return something a month later, I demanded the truth. That's when he finally confessed. He had been cheating with one of his undergrad students. 19 years old. He was her teaching assistant. He had power, influence, authority. And he was using all of it. I felt the heat rise in my face. My heart hammered. I screamed at him to get out. My roommate threatened to throw him off the balcony if he didn't leave immediately. He ran. When the door slammed shut behind him, something strange happened. My anger cracked open, and laughter spilled out. The kind of laughter that comes from clarity hitting all at once. Because in that moment everything clicked. The late-night wait comment. The coldness. The strange distance. The excuses. He hadn't cared about my appearance. He wanted me to break up with him. He wanted to avoid accountability. And the ironic part? The girl he cheated with was much bigger than I was. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But it exposed him. His words weren't about attraction. They were about manipulation. He was too cowardly to simply end things. So he tried to make me feel disposable. That night, I decided something silently. If he wanted to see me as insignificant, I would show him exactly how wrong he was. A week later, I emailed his roommates. Thanked them for being good friends. Told them we had broken up. They replied almost instantly. They knew everything. They had confronted him. They had pressured him to tell me. And he still chose a lie instead of honesty. One of them, George, reached out separately. He was kind, respectful, and honestly one of the few genuinely good men in that house. He said he had collected a few things of mine from the house. He offered to help me pick them up and suggested we go out for drinks afterward. Not in a romantic way. More like a "you deserve better, and I want to help you reclaim your weekend" kind of way. I said yes. When I arrived, Jake was out. George let me into the house. As I walked through the familiar hallway, I noticed something I had never truly paid attention to before. The cages. The tanks. The labels. The animals that weren't supposed to be there. I wasn't a scientist, but I wasn't stupid. I noticed things. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't small. I wasn't a silent victim. I was someone who could see everything he tried to hide. And all I needed was evidence. I lifted da disposable camera. And clicked. Cage after cage. Illegal species. Endangered animals. Animals banned in the state. Animals he refused to register. Evidence, captured with the same casual precision he once used to judge my worth. I didn't know it yet, but those photos would become the first domino in the collapse of his entire life. And as George and I headed out that night, laughing loudly, I felt a shift inside me. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the first taste of power returning to my hands. And he had no idea what was coming. That night with George changed the entire tone of my story. It did not feel like a rebound or some petty performance to make Jake jealous. It felt like reclaiming my dignity after someone tried to shrink it with cheap words and cowardly choices. When we left the bar, the lights of the street blurred into soft streaks, the air cool and buzzing with the kind of freedom you only feel after walking out of a cage you did not realize you had been put into. By the time we stumbled back to the house, laughing too loudly and leaning into each other for balance, Jake and Meg were sitting on the couch watching television. George practically carried me through the door. The look on Jake's face was priceless. A mix of confusion, irritation, and something else that felt wonderfully close to panic. I watched Meg glance between us with wide eyes. George and I disappeared down the hallway to his room. We did not actually hook up, but that did not stop us from making sure it sounded like something was happening. Loud whispers, a few exaggerated giggles, even the sound of him walking into the hallway in only his boxers. The old wooden door creaked every time we opened it, just loud enough to carry into the living room. I could feel Jake's simmering anger from behind the closed door. It was not about me. It was never about me. It was about losing control. In the morning, I made sure to walk out in my ruffled dress, hair messy, holding a donut like it was the crown jewel of my petty triumph. George stood behind me, grinning like the world was a harmless joke. Jake spat out something about not needing to act like a whore. I let the word roll off me like a raindrop sliding down glass. Meg turned red, staring at her hands, clearly embarrassed for even being associated with him in that moment. I took the smallest bite of the donut and said, "Have fun with my leftovers." Then I walked out. At the time, I believed that little moment was my revenge. A satisfying slap to his ego. But I was wrong. That was not revenge. That was the warm-up. When I got home, my camera was full of photos. Illegal animals. Endangered animals. Animals banned by the state unless registered. Animals he refused to file paperwork for because he didn't want the government in his business. I remembered the way he bragged about it once, as if ignoring the law was some badge of honor, as if rules were for people beneath him. I had choices. I could walk away, let it go, focus on my life. But betrayal has a way of opening your eyes to the things you previously ignored. And what I saw in that house was no longer something I could morally look away from. The animals deserved better, and the law deserved to know. The next morning, I drove to the local photo lab and handed over the camera. Waiting for film to be developed is a lost art of suspense. As I sat in my car, I drummed my fingers against the steering wheel. Part of me felt anxious. Not guilty, not afraid, just aware that what I was about to do would change the trajectory of someone's life forever. When I finally held those prints in my hand, something inside me hardened. Not anger, not spite, something cleaner, something rooted in justice. I called the State Office of Fish and Wildlife. The woman on the phone spoke with a calm, professional tone, but I could hear her interest sharpen when I explained what I had found. Illegal possession, endangered species, improper housing, lack of required filings. She walked me through the reporting process. I emailed the photos. I gave specific details, addresses, dates, cage descriptions, animal types. She thanked me and I hung up. My heart pounded for a moment, then steadied. I did not feel fear. I felt relief. Relief that I had finally done something that mattered. But I was not done. George and the other roommate had already reported Jake for sleeping with Meg. After all, she was his student, 19 years old, and he was 26 with authority over her grades. The program was small. Word traveled fast. Women in his classes whispered to each other in hallways. Professors raised eyebrows. Rumors spread like wildfire. And because the truth was on our side, the rumors stuck. Still, I wanted to make sure the right people knew. So I reached out to Mary. She had always liked me, always treated me like a person instead of a side character in Jake's academic world. I told her everything. The cheating, the student relationship, the breakup, the weight comment, the emails where he admitted to the relationship. She was silent for a moment on the phone. Then her voice dropped into something low, firm, and dangerous. "We will take this seriously," she said. And she meant it. Her husband was Jake's direct advisor, the man who approved his research, the man who co-signed his academic funding, the man whose recommendation determined whether he stayed in the program. And now he knew everything. I slept well that night for the first time in weeks. A few days later, George called me. His voice was bright, crackling with excitement. "They're here," he said. "Who?" "Fish and Wildlife. They have badges, trucks, everything. They're taking the animals." I sat up in bed, adrenaline flushing through me. "They're what?" "Confiscating them. All of them." Meg is freaking out. She thought the animals were fine. The officers aren't buying anything she says. They're asking a lot of questions. I imagine the scene. Officers carrying cages out the front door. Neighbors watching from porches. Meg pacing pale and shaky. Jake unreachable. Probably on campus unaware that his life was tipping into free fall. George kept talking, giving me details. One animal had been in the backyard, visible from the street. That alone was enough for an investigation. But once they stepped inside and looked through the back window, they saw the truly illegal one. The one no one in the state was allowed to possess without strict federal permits. The one he bragged about rescuing but never registered. George was on the lease, so he let them inside. Legally. The animals were all in the shared areas of the house. The officers stayed for hours examining cages, tanks, and enclosures. They left, returned with a warrant, and entered Jake's locked bedroom. By the time Jake found out, it was too late. The next few weeks unfolded like a chain reaction. A grant for environmental research requires a clean record with federal wildlife laws. Jake had just secured an EPA grant worth tens of thousands. When Fish and Wildlife forwarded their report to the EPA, everything collapsed. The grant was revoked. He was required to pay back roughly $30,000 that had already been used. He was barred from receiving future federal funding. Without funding, his academic career was crippled. And then the university took action. His scholarship was pulled. He was fired as a teaching assistant. He narrowly avoided being expelled entirely, all because of two things he thought he could get away with: illegal animals, and a student he should never have touched. Meg, for all her complicity, avoided consequences because she was 19 and sheltered. She believed him, believed they were in love, believed he would protect her. Instead, she watched officers carry away animals while Jake hid from responsibility. Meanwhile, I moved on with my life. At least I tried to. For the first few months after everything, I felt a strange mix of freedom and heaviness. Freedom because I had removed someone toxic from my life. He had lied, cheated, manipulated, and insulted me. But heaviness because revenge, even justified revenge, comes with emotional residue. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far. Then I would remember the illegal animals, the underage student he manipulated, the way he tried to shame me into breaking up with him, the way he expected me to take his betrayal in silence. And I would breathe easier. Still, the universe was not done with him. Not yet. Months later, I reconnected with his sisters. They asked why I disappeared. I told them the truth. All of it. They were furious. Not at me. At him. Because he had told the family something entirely different. He claimed I broke up with him because of distance. That I could not handle a long-distance relationship. That I drifted away. That he was heartbroken. I forwarded them his emails admitting he had cheated with Meg. Admitting he believed I couldn't keep up academically. Admitting it was his fault. His sisters never forgave him for that. His brother never forgave him for how he treated me. His parents, years later, would finally learn the real story. But that revelation came much, much later. For now I stayed silent. Let him twist. Let him rebuild his life in whatever shadow remained. I earned my master's degree. I carved my own path helping scientists communicate their work to everyday people. The irony was never lost on me. The girl he said did not know enough about science became the woman scientists hired to translate their work for the world. That alone was its own quiet justice. But the universe was preparing one more twist. The kind of twist that gives stories like this an ending people never forget. And it began 20 years later, when I stood in front of a lecture hall of 250 students and heard a familiar voice say my name. The moment I heard my name echo across that lecture hall, everything inside me froze. I had been answering questions from a small group of eager students, feeling the usual quiet pride that came with my work. But the sound of that voice, that tone, pulled me backward in time so sharply it felt like the floor shifted beneath my feet. I turned slowly, bracing myself, and there he was. Jake. Older, yes. Lines around his eyes. A tiredness he seemed to wear like a badge. But the same face. The same man who once belittled my intelligence. The same man who tried to break me quietly so he could slip out of the relationship without accountability. The same man whose actions set every domino of his downfall into motion. My first instinct was pure survival. I shut down emotionally. The way you do when you see a ghost wearing the skin of someone who once hurt you. I offered him a small, polite smile. Help me out, I said lightly. Have we met at another workshop or lecture? He blinked. Hard. Like someone had slapped him. It's me, he said. It's Jake. I tilted my head, letting my brows knit together. A beat of silence stretched between us. Then, as if the realization struck me late, I widened my eyes. Oh, Jake. Right. Now I remember. His face shifted from eager to confused to embarrassed. There was a flicker of disappointment, as though he wanted me to say I had thought about him all these years, as though he wanted to believe he lived rent-free in my mind the way he assumed every woman he left behind did. But he didn't. He never had. Well, I said warmly, lovely to see you. And before he could respond or lean in for a hug, I stepped away to talk to another student, leaving him standing there alone, exactly the way he left me all those years ago. I didn't think much more of it until dinner that evening. The department chair and two faculty members who had invited me out for the lecture took me to a small, cozy restaurant near campus. One of those places with soft lighting, cloth napkins, the faint smell of lemon and herbs drifting from the kitchen. As we sat down, one of the faculty members leaned in and said with a conspiratorial little smile, So you know Jake? My heart gave a slow, heavy thud. I lifted my glass of water, keeping my face calm. I did. A long time ago. We thought so, she replied. He's been here all week, interviewing for a teaching position. He's been shadowing classes, meeting faculty. We're considering hiring him. I don't know how to describe what happened next. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't anger. It was a sound I didn't expect to make, a sharp, involuntary scoff. A sound that slipped out before I could filter it. All 3 faculty members paused. Their forks hovered mid-air. Their eyes locked onto me. Sorry, I said quickly, trying to soften my tone. It's just surprising to hear he's gone into teaching after. What happened? What happened? The chair asked. The conversation at the table suddenly felt different. The air heavier. Curious. Alert. I rested my hands on the table. I wasn't excited. I wasn't eager. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about truth. And prevention. And the sick feeling that someone like Jake could easily hurt another 19-year-old who trusted him. So I told them. Not everything. Not the animals. Not the grant. Not the fine. Just the part that mattered most to a university hiring committee. Years ago, I said slowly, he was in a PhD program. He was a teaching assistant. And he was caught sleeping with one of his 19-year-old students. Their expressions changed instantly. He lost his scholarship, lost his TA position. He left the program with a lesser degree because he could not afford to continue. Silence settled on the table like dust. They exchanged glances, heavy glances, glances that said something was suddenly very wrong. Wow, one finally murmured. We definitely need to look into that. The rest of dinner was polite, but the energy had shifted. The decision about Jake was no longer a formality. It was a problem. 2 days later, Mary called me. Even after retirement, she still kept in touch with old colleagues. And because her husband had been Jake's advisor, her name was on the original reports from all those years ago. Guess what I heard? She said, her voice laced with satisfaction. I could hear her smile through the phone. Someone at the university called Human Resources doing a background check on Jake. They pulled his old file. The entire file. All the complaints. The student misconduct. The termination. And even the wildlife arrest. I blinked. His arrest record was expunged though. It was, she replied. But academic records aren't expunged. And the arrest was in the appendix of the conduct file. They found everything. I closed my eyes. Not out of joy. Out of closure. Jake had spent 20 years outrunning the consequences of his own actions. He had tried to rebuild himself into someone respectable. Someone hireable. Someone worthy of standing in front of a classroom full of students who would trust him. And in one background check, the past caught up to him. It wasn't my intention to destroy him again. I didn't contact anyone. I didn't plan it. I simply existed in the right place at the right moment. But sometimes the universe does not need your help turning the wheel. It just needs you to tell the truth when the moment arrives. For years after our breakup, I had thought about the strange contradiction Jake lived in. He wanted authority but hated responsibility. He wanted respect but refused to earn it. He wanted brilliant students but dated the vulnerable ones. He wanted to call himself a scientist, but ignored the laws meant to protect wildlife. He wanted me small and quiet, so he could grow without consequence. He built his life like a house on loose sand, and then wondered why it shifted beneath him. As I sat at my desk later that night, reviewing notes for my next talk, a thought hit me. The kind that feels like a gentle tap on the shoulder from the universe. I didn't ruin Jake's life. I never had. Jake ruined his own life. I simply stopped protecting him from the truth. The funny thing is, part of me had once believed he moved on cleanly, married Meg, had children, found stability. But that belief eroded the more I learned from his siblings. The resentment they held, the tension between the family and Meg, the unspoken wounds from years earlier, the way his parents found out 10 years after our breakup what really happened, that he had cheated, lied, manipulated, and blamed me. And now 20 years later, the final piece of truth surfaced. He was not going to get that teaching job. And for the first time in my life, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not smugness. Not pride. Just peace. A peace that settled deep into my bones. Warm and steady. Like something had finally been set right. But there was one more moment. One last moment when everything came full circle. A moment I didn't even realize would mean anything to me until I was standing in it. It happened shortly after Mary's call, when I walked into a quiet hallway on campus and saw Jake standing alone, holding a folder, his shoulders slumped, a defeated stillness clinging to him like a shadow. He looked up. Our eyes met, and in that split second, I could see it. He knew. He knew he wasn't getting the job. He knew someone had told them the truth. He just didn't know who. He opened his mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to defend, maybe to ask. But I simply offered him a small, polite nod. The same nod you give a stranger. A stranger who no longer has any power over your life. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps. No words. Just silence. The kind of silence that carries the weight of 20 years of consequences finally landing where they belonged. And as I stepped into the sunlight outside, something settled inside me forever. Justice is not loud. It does not scream or demand praise. It arrives quietly, at the exact moment you stop needing it. I thought that was the end of it. But the universe had one more message to deliver. A final reminder that the path you choose, no matter how long ago, always finds its way back to you. And it happened on a day I least expected, when a simple envelope with no return address showed up in my mailbox. The envelope was plain. No return address. No markings. Just my name written in a neat, controlled handwriting I did not recognize. I stood in my kitchen holding it the way you hold something that feels heavier than it should. Like there was a weight inside it that had nothing to do with paper. For a moment, I simply stared at it. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting warm streaks of light across the counter. Everything around me felt calm, still, yet something inside me stirred. Carefully, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No signature. Just a typed message, crisp and centered on the page. Thank you, whoever you are. You protected students you have never met. We made the right decision. That was it. No explanation. No accusation. Just a simple acknowledgement that truth had done what it was meant to do. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. My breath caught somewhere in my chest, not out of fear but out of something deeper. Something like closure expanding within me. For years, I had imagined revenge as something sharp, loud, explosive. But the real victory was quiet. It lived in knowing that I had never lied, never manipulated, never struck first. All I had done was tell the truth, and the truth had done the rest. In that moment, I realized something I had never put into words before. Revenge is not about destruction. It is about restoration. It is about restoring your dignity, your self-worth, your story. Jake had taken none of those things from me. He had tried. He had reached for my confidence with the casual cruelty of someone who believed he had the right to reshape me. But he failed. Because what he underestimated most was not my intelligence, not my resilience, not my ability to fight back. He underestimated my memory. Not the memory of our relationship, but the memory of who I was before him, and who I became after I walked away. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it arrives 20 years late, wearing the face of fate and timing. But it arrives. And when it does, it reminds you that truth has a longer memory than any lie. If you found strength, satisfaction, or inspiration in this story, consider supporting this channel. Your likes, comments, and shares help more people discover stories where justice is not just imagined, but lived. Tell me in the comments what you would have done, or share your own story of standing up for yourself. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, karma never forgets. Revenge had never been about punishing him. It had been about protecting everything he endangered. People, animals, students, myself. I stood there for a long time, letting the sunlight filter through the trees, breathing in the warm air, feeling a calm I had never felt with him. A calm that came from knowing I had reclaimed my story piece by piece. Years passed. My life grew fuller. And one morning, as I sat on my porch sipping a cup of tea, I realized something simple but profound. I had won. Not because Jake lost, but because I healed. Because I grew. Because I lived a life that was never meant to include him long term. He was a chapter. I was the book. And sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone your past cannot touch, cannot wound, cannot diminish. I folded the mysterious thank you letter and placed it in my journal. I did not know who sent it. I did not need to know. It belonged to the story. The final punctuation to a 20-year saga that had started with a boy who thought I was small and ended with a woman who learned she was never small at all. As for Jake, I never saw him again. But sometimes, when I stand in front of a classroom or a conference hall, when I speak with authority earned through decades of work, I think back to that quiet moment in the hallway. The look in his eyes when he realized his past had finally caught up. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was recognition. He recognized the woman standing in front of him. Not the girl he left behind. The woman who chose truth over fear. Action over silence. Growth over resentment. And that was enough. That will always be enough. In the end, my story is not about the fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. It is about the rise of a woman who believed in herself. It is about the moments we choose to stand up for what is right, even when it feels easier to walk away. It is about the quiet strength that grows inside us after someone tries to convince us we are weak. According to his sister, Meg had begun to question him. Not about the past, but about the patterns, the defensiveness, the avoidance, the way he shut down whenever responsibility was mentioned, the way he grew bitter whenever someone else succeeded. His sister said, without malice, that Meg no longer admired him. She pitied him. And that kind of pity erodes the foundation of love faster than anything else. At first, I felt a flicker of sympathy, not for him, but for her. For the woman who had been 19 when he pulled her into a relationship she did not understand. For the life she built on a version of him that never truly existed. But sympathy is not the same as responsibility. Their story was theirs alone. As life settled back into its rhythm, the past drifted farther and farther behind me. My lectures grew in demand. My work expanded. I traveled. I taught. I collaborated with scientists who respected the skills I had spent my life cultivating. I built a future anchored in purpose rather than pain. And sometimes, without meaning to, I thought of the animals. The endangered ones. The rescued ones. The ones that had been taken from Jake's house and placed safely in a nature center. On trips back to that area, I would stop by and visit them. A quiet ritual that reminded me that even the smallest choices can save something precious. One afternoon, while visiting the nature center, I found myself watching one of the animals Jake had illegally kept. It moved slowly, deliberately, with a quiet dignity that caught me off guard. And in that moment it hit me. For a long time, after that envelope arrived, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. Not the dramatic parts. Not the legal consequences or the academic fallout. Not even the moment he saw me standing on that stage 20 years later. What I thought about most were the smallest moments. The night he told me I had gained weight, as though my worth lived in a number he invented. The night I walked through his house with a camera, knowing in my bones that what I saw was wrong. The moment George opened his door to me, not as someone broken, but as someone who deserved better. The countless conversations with Mary, who saw the truth in ways Jake never could. The silent nights alone when I wondered if justice was ever going to find its way to him. And then the day I stood in front of 250 students, respected for my experience, my voice, my mind, only to turn and see the man who once claimed I did not know enough about science. Life has a sense of humor, a sense of balance, a sense of timing that would be comedic if it weren't so perfectly karmic. But the story did not end there. Months after the university rescinded his candidacy, I heard from his sister. She reached out to share updates about her life, but eventually, softly, she brought up Jake. Not from a place of gossip, but from a place of tired honesty. He had told the family he was passed over for reasons unrelated to performance. He blamed politics. funding, competition. He blamed everything except himself. But his siblings knew. His parents knew. And eventually Meg knew too. Relationships built on lies have a way of collapsing under their own weight. What begins in secrecy rarely survives transparency. And Jake had lived most of his life pretending consequences belonged to other people. The truth finally caught up.